No one was ready for how Suga stood today on the small rehearsal room stage in Seoul, dimly lit with only a single warm spotlight cutting through the quiet, his black hoodie casting a shadow across his eyes. No crew, no fanfare, just the subtle breath of anticipation and the tangle of audio cables trailing like veins across the studio floor. And without a single warning, he stepped up to the mic and spoke softly. "I need to say this because it's the only thing on my mind." Then sat down, adjusted his headphones, and played an 11-second raw instrumental loop, the bass low and pulsing like a heartbeat trying to suppress something heavier. Suddenly he stopped and stared directly at the camera filming from the corner of the room and whispered, "This is not for BTS. This is not for Korea. This one is just for me, and maybe for them too." Without defining who them was, he held up his phone, revealing a note filled with scattered phrases in his own digital handwriting, one of which clearly read, "If the fire burns from the west, I will bring the smoke," and everyone in the room, including the two silent technical staff, shared a glance, not daring to interrupt, because they all knew Suga wasn't just making a song. He was building a moment, something he had carried in his chest for too long, now destined for a solo performance in the US that had been quietly planned with zero press noise. And when one staff member whispered nervously, "Hyung, are you ready for this kind of message?" Suga gave a short laugh and opened another tab on his laptop, revealing a waveform titled August D3 /SRUSA without offering any more explanation. Then he hit play on a second section of the track, where the tempo quickened and the sound of crowd noise swelled before being suddenly overlaid with a recording of his own voice speaking in English. "This might be the beginning of the end or the end of what they expected me to be." A line that struck the room like a sudden shift in gravity. Too honest, too raw, then silence again except for the soft clicks of his mouse and the hum of his computer processing layers of sound, until he muttered, "I'm done hiding," and opened another file called Stage Notes, which contained cryptic stage directions. Blue flames, black rain, silhouettes of empty chairs, the crackle of an old radio repeating the word, "confess," and when an assistant asked hesitantly, "Is this all part of the intro?" Suga answered without looking, "This is just the prelude," and at the same time, he underlined one lyric in his note app, "Don't wait for applause, I only need silence to start." And without warning he stood up, took off his hoodie, revealing a plain white shirt with red ink spelling out one sentence. "NYC is not ready." And everyone froze because that clue alone suggested a venue, a city, a target that had never been confirmed by any public statement, not even internally at HYBE. Then his phone buzzed with a notification from someone saved as MC, displaying only a fire emoji and an hourglass. And Suga's expression shifted immediately to something sharper, something prepared. Like this moment had finally caught up with a plan he never voiced out loud. And when the final sound clip played, a whisper that said, "The world ends not with a bang, but with a beat I never shared." No one in the room breathed, all eyes locked on the screen displaying a countdown with no time, no date, no label, just a single word pulsing slowly on black background. He didn't explain the countdown, he just walked slowly to the corner of the room where an unopened box had been sitting the entire time wrapped in silver foil tape with only one word scribbled on the top in thick black marker reverse. And as he peeled it open, he revealed a small metal cassette player looking old like something from the 90s along with a folded piece of paper, which he handed to one of the staff members without speaking. The paper contained a sketch of a stage layout, completely unfamiliar to anyone in the room, including a giant hourglass tilted sideways and stage lights shaped like thorns, and a note scribbled in the margin saying, "Don't follow the lights, they lie," which made everyone even more confused, especially when Suga finally inserted the lone cassette into the player and pressed play, revealing a scratchy lo-fi version of his own voice, humming a haunting melody, no words, just the kind of tune that sounds like memory and regret intertwined. And then the tape clicked into silence and he looked up and said, "This is the core of the set, the part where everyone forgets they're watching." Then someone asked carefully, "Hyung, are you leaking this on purpose?" And he just smiled and said, "I'm not leaking, I'm reminding them that I never left," and opened his laptop again, this time to a file labeled NY Stage Proj, and scrolled through dozens of photos of American theaters, all dimly lit, all empty except one marked in red, Rialto. And that's when one of the crew members whispered, "Wait, that's the abandoned one in Times Square." And Suga nodded slowly and finally answered, They'll never expect silence in the loudest place. And the layers began to connect. This was not just a concert, this was an act of reclamation, a performance hidden inside a puzzle inside a memory, and when he opened a folder titled Clues, the screen showed a series of cryptic images. One of a hand holding a match in front of a mirror, one of a broken microphone submerged in water, and one of his own shadow walking away from 7 faint silhouettes with the caption, "Thank you, but I have to go alone now." And just as the silence in the room became unbearable, the audio from the cassette resumed for a split second with a single spoken phrase, "Don't record this, don't post this, if you hear this you're part of it." Then static again, then silence, and no one dared move until Suga finally stood up, fully faced the camera now, recording everything in slow motion, and declared, "This isn't a comeback, this is a confrontation." Then pulled out a printed lyric sheet with the words, "I write so I don't explode, I sing so I don't disappear," circled in red, and tucked it into his pocket as he stepped out of frame, and the camera caught the very last thing he whispered as he passed by. "When the lights go out, remember I warned you." And the screen cut to black with only the date, June 25th, scribbled in tiny font at the bottom right corner, just faint enough to be missed by anyone not looking too closely, and the studio remained frozen in place like they had just witnessed the spark before a fire no one knew was already burning underneath. And as the weight of that final whisper settled in the air like ash, the entire room remained still, no one reaching for their phones, no one daring to speak first, because there was something about the way Suga walked out that didn't feel like an exit, but more like the ignition of a fuse. And just as one assistant leaned over to power down the main monitor, another window popped open unprompted. A video file titled Doorway began to play with zero context, only an overhead shot of a door slightly ajar, light pouring out in slow flickers like a heartbeat, and the faint sound of footsteps pacing, then stopping, then pacing again, layered under a warped piano chord that repeated every 7 seconds. And in the bottom corner of the screen, a new phrase faded in frame by frame, "Do not enter until the beat drops," followed by the slow reveal of Suga's handwriting spelling out a single name, August. Then blackness. The screen shut itself off, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the server rack and one blinking cursor that pulsed in rhythm with the leftover audio still echoing from the old cassette player, which somehow had begun spinning again without being touched. And someone finally broke the silence, whispering, "He's not teasing a track, he's orchestrating a message." And then came the buzz of a new email notification on the control desk computer, sent from an anonymous address. Subject line, "Proof of concept, attachment, concept /storyboard /final PSD." And as they opened the file, it showed a detailed storyboard sketch of a live stage split in 4 quadrants titled Fire, Glass, Whispers, and Code, with instructions underneath written in all caps saying, "The order changes depending on the crowd's energy, don't fix the flow, let them lead." And it became instantly clear. This wasn't just an ordinary performance, it was an adaptive living concert that responded to the emotion of the crowd, a structure that rewrote itself in real time, and embedded within the layers of that concept board were more clues, some of them visual like a clock face, missing the number 7, some written like, "Sing, only when it hurts, otherwise it's not worth it." And hidden in the color key was one curious note, "NYC is the shell, the heartbeat is buried elsewhere," which spun everyone into speculation, wondering whether the New York stage was a misdirection, a facade for something deeper, maybe a recording, maybe a pop-up, maybe an unreleased docuseries in disguise. But before anyone could dig further, the room lights dimmed completely, and the projection screen turned back on, this time showing a live feed of an empty stage somewhere dark, backlit with faint static, and only one mic stand in the center wrapped in red thread, and the same voice from earlier echoed through the speaker, "Don't decode it, live it." And that was when one of the audio engineers remembered something strange. Earlier that day, Suga had asked to borrow a reel-to-reel recorder and had been humming a tune they didn't recognize, now matching the exact melody playing faintly behind the visual feed. And as they listened closely to the distant ambient audio, they could hear faint crowd noise layered with indistinct voices chanting something that sounded like, "We already knew," over and over. And suddenly the feed cut, and a single text prompt appeared, white over black. What if the encore started before the show even began?